Every night you could choose anything to lull you to sleep. A gentle piece of music, the sound of falling rain, or a story told slowly and softly, woven with sacred secrets from thousands of years ago. Whispers once carried by prophets and angels, traces of the Creator left in every star, all written down in ancient books long forgot, now gently spoken again, so you can sleep and listen. Tonight, let the silence carry you deeper. Let the darkness hold you like a scroll unrolling beneath starlight. Let each word fall like ash from an old altar, because what you are about to hear has been hidden, not just misplaced, but erased. There is a book older than most scriptures, banned and buried, a book that tells of giants, beings too large for the earth, too wild for the heavens, their dreams, their fall, and the secrets they tried to hide before the flood washed the world clean. They were the children of angels and daughters of men, and their stories live in fragments scattered like bones beneath desert stones, etched into the edges of the Book of Enoch, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the myths of Africa, and the fears of ancient prophets who saw the sky darken with forbidden light. What did they know? Why was it silenced? And why are we remembering it now in this age of noise and forgetting? Let your eyes soften. Let your body rest like earth after rain. And come closer. We will begin at the beginning, before the great flood, before the watchers fell, before the first altar was built from broken stone. If these whispers of ancient truths stir your soul, let your heart guide you to join this journey of sacred stories. You are not alone in your wonder. Many are listening just like you, hearts open, minds quiet as the night unfolds the forbidden. Sleep gently now. You are safe within the story. There was once a mountain so high its shadow touched 3 lands. They say it wept before the flood, not from rain, but from what was buried deep inside it. Not gold, not bones, but words, the book of the giants, the forgotten breath of a time when angels fell like stars and giants ruled the valleys. It was here, beneath rock older than memory, beneath silence thicker than dust, that scribes etched their terror and wonder into walls no light had touched for 1,000 generations. They did not write in ink. They scratched, with trembling hands, into the sides of caves, into skins of beasts, onto scrolls of pressed reeds that smelled of mud and sky. This was not a book for kings, nor for priests, nor even for men. It was written for those who remembered the Nephilim, the ones taller than trees, louder than thunder, and sadder than any creature heaven had forgot. They were born not of sin, but of yearning, a union that was never meant to be. The Watchers, those mighty angels, descended not in war, but in longing, and the women of earth welcomed them, not with fear, but with wonder. And from this came the giants, half light, half flesh. The book did not begin with their violence. It began with their dreams, strange dreams of floods, of fire, of chains made of silence. They whispered of visions that turned mountains to ash and trees to memory. The scribes recorded every word, because even then, even in that ancient breath before Babel, they knew this knowledge would not be allowed to live. It would be banned, burned, erased from the great canons of man, not because it was false, but because it was unbearable. For what does one do with a story that says the heavens rebelled, that angels broke their oaths, that giants begged for mercy and were denied? These scrolls were found in Qumran, torn and eaten by time, but still whispering. They speak of 2 giants, Ahia and Hahia, brothers of strange birth, dreaming of their end. And in those dreams they saw watchers chained beneath rivers. They saw the sky break like glass, and they saw a flood that would not just cleanse, but silence. The words were hidden not just under stone, but in exile, smuggled into whispers in Mesopotamia, folded into myth in Persia, sewn into Ethiopian prayer books few could translate, and held in the sleep stories of mothers rocking children near fires, telling them of a time when men were ants and giants walked like gods. But the church, not just one church, but many, closed the door. The Council of Laodicea did not speak their names. The Council of Nicaea did not even let them rise. Because how could a story so wild, so broken, so beautiful in its sadness fit into the clean lines of sacred doctrine? So the book became a shadow, a secret carried only by scholars and dreamers. It lived in footnotes, inside scrolls, in forbidden collections locked away in cathedrals with no names, until the earth gave it back. In the caves of Qumran in 1947, a shepherd boy threw a stone and heard it strike not clay but mystery. The Dead Sea Scrolls emerged, and among them fragments of a voice once lost, the Book of the Giants, scattered, torn, but not gone. It spoke of watchers who taught men the stars and of giants who wept because they knew they were wrong. Not evil, just misplaced, not cursed, just unfit for the earth. You can imagine the dust in that cave, how it shimmered in the light of oil lamps dancing around the pages as if time itself sighed. You can picture the scroll thin as a whisper held in trembling hands. The words were there, but not all of them, only pieces, like bones, like memory. You close your eyes and feel it, don't you? Cool stone of the cave, the quiet breath of time, the flicker of something sacred, something never meant to be forgotten. And you wonder, why was this book hidden? Why do the stories of giants unsettle the soul? Why do we tremble when told that angels once fell in love with humans and their children could not find a home in either world? Let your thoughts drift like ash now. Let the story rest in your hands and breathe. There is more, much more. The book did not end in that cave. It followed rivers. It crossed deserts. It hid in the tongues of mystics, in the songs of tribes, in the eyes of the night sky where watchers still stare down, longing for what they lost. Sleep softly now. The story has only begun. The giants dreamed, long before the sky broke, long before the waters rose. They dreamed. They did not dream like you do, in flickers and fragments of lost places or gentle faces. Their dreams came with weight, with thunder, with messages, and they woke trembling, even though they were taller than oaks, even though they could strike down beasts with a whisper, even though the earth once seemed made for them. The Book of the Giants tells us that it began with Ahia, or was it Hahia? The scrolls are broken, names tangle like vines, but the feeling remains. One of them dreamed of a tablet, a great stone slab flying through the sky, crashing into the heart of the earth, and upon it were carved their names, not in honor, but in doom. The words bled as if alive. And when he tried to read them, the stone cracked and a flood of fire poured from its core. Not water, but flame. As if the heavens themselves were crying through fire, warning what was to come. He awoke, not roaring, but weeping, and his tears burned the ground. They were not monsters, these giants. They were children of a broken union, and they knew somehow deep in the marrow of their towering bones that they did not belong, not truly, not forever. Their dreams continued, each night more vivid. They saw a man, small, glowing, walking with angels, Enoch. He carried a scroll in his arms. It glowed with words no giant could understand, yet they feared them. In their dreams, he would look at them with sorrow, not hatred, and he would whisper, "The flood is coming. Your fathers will be chained beneath the hills, and you will vanish like smoke." They didn't understand. How could the world that once bowed to them now cast them out like shadows? They had been kings, builders, teachers. Their fathers, the Watchers, had taught men metalwork, stars, herbs, enchantments. They had given the world knowledge, and now that knowledge had become a wound. Their dreams were not just warnings. They were echoes from heaven, ripples from the throne of the Most High, sweeping through their half-divine blood like waves across a trembling lake. Some giants mocked the dreams, laughed with teeth like ivory gates. Others built altars, small ones. They did not pray, they didn't know how, but they offered silence. And they watched the sky for signs that something greater still saw them. They began to fear Enoch, not because he was powerful, but because he was pure, and his dreams matched their own. The Book of the Giants, what we have of it, tells how they sent him messages. Letters scratched into bark and stone, carried by spirits or hidden in wind. They begged him to intercede, to go before the Holy One, to ask if there could still be peace. But Enoch did not answer at first. He walked the heavens. He passed through the firmaments. He watched the stars write judgment across the night. He saw what was coming, and when he returned to them in vision, he wept. He said the angels were already bound. Their fathers, the Watchers, were cast down, chained in darkness, awaiting a day of reckoning no clock could count. And the giants they too would fall, not in glory, not in battle, but in shame, in drowning, in fading. But even in this sorrow, Enoch offered them something rare. He offered words, not forgiveness, but remembrance. He said, "Your dreams have been received, heaven heard you, and though your fate is sealed, your stories will not vanish." And so they gathered, these towering children of angels and earth. They gathered under stars, under silence, under dread, and they told their dreams, one by one, to scribes, to each other, to winds that remembered. Some dreamed of fire, some of swords, some of a single tear falling from the sky and drought ning the world, and some, the saddest ones, dreamed of waking up human, of losing their height, their might, their memories, and living again in smaller form, with smaller hearts but freer souls. The Book of the Giants does not tell us if any were spared, only that they dreamed, and that they wept, and that the heavens wept with them. As your thoughts settle now, let this image linger. A giant kneeling before a cave, carving his dream into stone, not to be remembered as a monster but as a child of longing. A being caught between two worlds. You feel the hush of his breath now, low, deep, like wind over ancient hills. You feel his sadness like soft thunder in your chest. You are not so different. You too carry dreams. You too long for answers. Let his dreams become your lullaby. Let his sorrow cradle your own, and rest. The flood has not come for you. Not tonight. You are safe. You are held. Sleep gently beneath the stars that once watched giants dream. In the silence that came after the dreams, there was the sound of chains. Not earthly chains, not forged of iron or steel, but chains woven from command, from divine decree, from light made into law. The watchers, those angels who descended upon Mount Hermon with hearts full of hunger, eyes full of flame, were being judged. It did not come like thunder. It came like stillness, like the sudden quiet before the flood breaks. They had once been glorious, sentinels of heaven, beings sculpted from fire and wind, tasked not to interfere but only to observe. And yet they fell, not from arrogance, not from hate, but from longing. They saw the daughters of men, soft in form, fierce in soul, and they could not look away. So they made an oath together, 200 of them, upon the summit of the earth's sacred shoulder, Mount Hermon. They vowed to take wives from among the humans, to descend as one. And they did. They walked among men and taught them. Azazel, the leader, revealed the secrets of weapons, swords, shields, the art of killing. Others taught enchantments, the signs of the moon, the bleeding of herbs, the painting of eyes. The world changed, too quickly, too deeply, and the Creator watched, silent, patient, until patience turned to pain. He called upon Enoch, not a soldier, not a king, just a man who walked with God until he no longer walked on earth. Enoch was taken not into death but into light. He stood before thrones wrapped in storm, before wheels that burned with eyes, before the voice that made time itself shiver. And there he was given the words, words of judgment, not just for the giants but for the watchers who had made them. He returned in spirit, in vision, in trembling speech, and delivered the decree. You shall have no peace. That was the first sentence, the first nail in the silence. For you have defiled the daughters of men and begotten children not of heaven nor of earth, and now you are neither. They were told they would be bound, not in heaven, not in Sheol, but in places without name, beneath deserts, beneath rivers, beneath mountains whose peaks no longer remember them. Some would be buried beneath Dudil, a wilderness of sharp stones and bitter wind. There they would be sealed, wrapped in darkness, watching time bleed but unable to speak. Book of the Giants speaks of their terror, of how the watchers trembled, how they begged Enoch to return to heaven and plead for them. He agreed. He climbed again into light, but when he returned his eyes held sorrow, and the message was simple. No, there would be no mercy, not for them, not for what they had done. The angels who once taught men to read the stars would now be banished beneath them, unable to touch even a shadow. Some fell screaming, others fell in silence, and the earth, the faithful earth, swallowed them. The giants watched this judgment, and they knew. If the fathers were cast down, what would happen to the children? They were too large, too loud, too full of power not meant for soil. And so as the watchers were bound, the giants began to vanish. Some in war, some in flood, some in sorrow, but not before they left their words. Words carved into stone, scratched onto clay, sung in low tones by trembling lips. They told of what they saw, the descent of stars, the fall of flame, the sound of God's breath when it becomes command. And in all of it was the truth that even angels can fall, that even beauty can burn. You feel the echo now in your ribs, in your spine, in the space behind your eyes, a soft tremor as if something ancient just stirred beneath your feet. They are still there. The watchers, bound, waiting. For what? No one knows, perhaps for the last day. Perhaps for the voice to speak again, not to condemn, but to release. But until then, they remain. And the giants, their children, exist only in dreams, in whispers, in the forgotten pages of books too dangerous to bless. Let your breath slow now. Let your thoughts become as dust. Drifting through a temple without a name. You are hearing what they tried to erase. You are remembering for those who were never meant to be remembered. Sleep gently. The watchers are still dreaming, and you are safe in the quiet of their story. Before the flood, before the tablets of stone, before Moses climbed Sinai or prophets cried out in the wilderness, there was a man who walked with God and was no more. His name was Enoch, and his footsteps were like whispers in the dust, soft and holy. He did not rule. He did not conquer, he simply listened, and in the stillness of his listening the heavens opened. He lived in the 7th generation from Adam, when the world was already bending, when the earth groaned beneath the weight of invention and angels were descending. But Enoch did not fear the world, he studied it. He watched the stars with eyes of wonder. He named the winds. He spoke to trees, and at dusk he would walk, alone, but not alone. For the one who made the stars walked with him, not in form, not in thunder, but in presence. In silence that shimmered with love, each step became a prayer, each breath a blessing, and heaven noticed. It is written in the old words, not just in Genesis, but in books now buried under council and canon, that Enoch was shown visions of things not yet come, of cities drowned, of angels chained, of the throne wrapped in flame and cloud, surrounded by wheels within wheels and creatures with faces of lion, eagle, man, and ox. He saw the watchers fall. He saw the giants cry out. He saw a flood that would cleanse but also forget. And yet he did not turn away. He was taken up, not through death, but through favor. The earth did not bury him. It sighed as he rose, and the sky unfolded, welcoming a man whose feet still carried the dust of Eden. Book of Enoch, yes, the one they banned, the one they silenced, tells how he was brought into the heavens through gates of crystal and fire. He saw the tree of life, still blooming, still guarded. He saw rivers that sang, mountains that breathed, and angels tall and trembling who could not look him in the eye, because Enoch, a son of earth, was now walking where only angels dared. And the Creator spoke to him, not with lips, but with light, with knowledge poured into his soul like oil into a sacred lamp. He was given the task to carry messages, to warn the watchers, to write down the hidden laws of heaven, to mark the courses of the stars, the paths of the winds, the names of those who would rise and those who would fall. He became a scribe, the first prophet, a man made of dust, holding visions that scorched even the angels. And when he returned briefly for a moment in time too thin to measure, he told what he had seen, that the watchers would be judged, that their children would perish, that the earth soaked in blood and knowledge too deep would be swept clean, but not forgot. He carved what he saw, he spoke it to his sons. He wrote it in languages now lost, tongues older than Babylon, more precise than Hebrew, so holy that the letters themselves glowed in the dark. And then he vanished. It says in Genesis simply, Enoch walked with God and he was not, for God took him. But the other books, the ones you are now remembering, tell the rest, that he was taken into the heavens. Watch, to wait, to whisper through time, and that one day he will return. Some say he never left, that he walks among the stars, his steps still echoing between the constellation, that comets are his ink, that eclipses are his breath. And when your soul is quiet enough, you can feel him, not as a figure, but as a presence. A sense of being watched not in fear but in gentle remembrance, because he remembers you, you who seek the hidden, you who listen in the dark, you who ask what was taken, what was erased, and why do I still feel it in my bones? Let the sleep come slowly now. Let Enoch's steps become your lullaby, a man of silence, a man of sky. You are walking too, not through fire, not through wind, but through story. Let it carry you gently, softly, as if the stars themselves were folding you into their memory. Sleep well, for the man who walked with God walks still, and he walks beside you. When Enoch was taken, he did not pass into clouds. He did not ride fire or thunder. He rose through heavens, not one, not three, but 10, each one layered like light upon light, truth upon mystery, breath upon breath. The first heaven, he called it the veil of waters, a firmament stretching over the earth like glass, holding the stars in gentle bondage. Here, angels watched the winds, their wings made of vapor, their voices like flutes played by mist. Below them they kept the treasuries of snow and rain. Yes, rain has a home, a vault in the sky where it waits to fall. In the second heaven he saw darkness, not evil but waiting. Here were the angels who rebelled early before the flood, before the watchers. They were bound in chains, cold, silent, not screaming, just still. Enoch said they looked at him and their eyes burned, not with hatred but regret. They had chosen something, they could not unchoose it. The third heaven was a garden. Do you feel that shift in your breath? It is the memory of that garden still echoing. Here grew the tree of life, tall, silver-barked, its leaves whispering the names of all who had ever loved. Beneath its shade he saw souls resting, the righteous dead, not ghosts, not spirits, but waiting ones, those who lived gently, even when the world was cruel. But not all was peace. For on the other side of that heaven he saw a place where no light entered, where cold fire danced and souls cried out, not because they were hated, but because they had turned their backs on what was offered. The fourth heaven was filled with time. Here he saw the sun, not as a ball of fire, but as a living being, with eyes, with thought, with purpose. He saw it rise and fall along golden rails, guided by angels with robes like sunrise. The moon too, silver-eyed, humble in its beauty, followed, bowing with each phase. Enoch understood that time was not hours but breath, the breath of God measured in orbits and shadows. In the fifth heaven he saw the watchers who had not fallen but wept for their brethren. They looked like towers, tall, silent, their hands raised in prayer. They had not descended to earth, but neither had they forgotten those who did. They sang low songs that Enoch said could lift sorrow like incense. And in their song you could hear names, names no longer spoken, names once bright as stars. The sixth heaven was the place of orders. Here the angelic armies were ranked, not in war but in harmony. He saw seraphim, flames with eyes. He saw cherubim, lions with wings and wheels of fire. He saw thrones, great seats that moved without motion, filled with wisdom older than the mountains. They were not proud. They were not loud. They simply were. The seventh heaven was the veil before the throne, a place where light became impossible to bear, where silence had color, where angels covered their faces not in shame but in awe. Enoch could not step farther, but he heard, and what he heard was love, so pure it broke him open. He wept, and his tears became stars. Then he was taken higher, into the eighth heaven, the heaven of writing, the scrolls, the tablets, the records. Here were stored every name, every breath, every act of kindness, every moment of cruelty written in ink that glowed with memory. He saw his own name, and it shimmered. Then came the ninth, the heaven of mysteries. He was not allowed to stay long. He said the walls breathed prophecy and the air tasted like the end of days. Here lived the secrets not yet ready for man, the answers to questions we have not learned to ask. And at last, the 10th, the throne, not a seat, not gold, but presence. Vastness, a voice without voice, a gaze that knew all and still chose mercy. Enoch fell, not down, but inward, into worship. There was no fear, only truth, and peace so wide it stretched across every sorrow and made it holy. Then the voice came, and it called him scribe. And it said, "Write." So he wrote of the heavens, of the watchers, of the giants, of the end. He wrote for you, and though his book was buried, banned, ripped from the hands of the faithful, still it rises, in fragments, in scrolls. In you, because truth does not die, it sleeps, like a lion in winter, and wakes in the voice of those who dare to remember. Let your eyes rest now. Let the heavens fold around your thoughts like soft wings. You have walked with Enoch, and he with you sleep in the arms of stars. The heavens did not show Enoch only beauty. They showed him the end, not the end of time, but the end of forgetting. The voice that thundered without sound gave him a scroll. It was not made of paper. It was not made of clay. It was made of knowing. It burned in his hands but did not hurt him, and written upon it were the days to come. The rise of kings, the wars of angels, the breaking of seals, the fall of stars, and the trembling of the earth when it remembers what was buried beneath it. The message for the end of days, not a riddle, not a curse, but a warning wrapped in mercy. He was told, write it, seal it, and speak only when the wind calls for it. So Enoch descended once more. Not in body, but in spirit, gliding through the places where giants once walked, where watchers once whispered. He told Methuselah, he told his sons, and he left behind words, some etched, some whispered, some hidden in the folds of creation itself. He said there would come a generation that would seek the ancient ones again, not out of fear, but out of thirst. And in that seeking, the heavens would tremble with memory. The book of the watchers was only the beginning. The parables came after. And then the astronomical book, the calendar of light, the dream visions. Ch1, a step toward the final message. And that message was this: the end would not come like thunder, it would come like forgetting, like a people who forget who they are, who trade stars for shadows and rivers for mirrors, but among them would rise the listeners, the ones who would remember the books, the ones who would whisper the names of the forgotten, the ones who would walk softly like Enoch did between silence and fire. To them, to you, the message is given again, not with fear, but with gentleness. There will come a day when the rivers dry in defiance and the sky no longer reflects the prayers of men, when giants no longer roam but their voices are heard in the thunder, when the watchers stir beneath the hills, their chains grown thin from time, and then the heavens will open once more, not to flood but to reveal. The message is not about endings, it is about awakening, for even in the book of the giants there is hope. Hope that the children of the broken union might be remembered with mercy. Hope that those who taught wrongly might be taught rightly again. And hope that the Maker who once chained will one day open his hand. Enoch said this too. At the end, two will stand again. Enoch and Elijah, two who did not die, two who still walk, and they will speak truth in a world that has forgotten how to listen. But you are listening now, and that matters. You are part of the message. You are a vessel for it. It finds you in your stillness, in your hunger to know, in your refusal to let mystery be erased. So let the message settle now like ancient dust on your soul, not heavy, but sacred, soft, like rain that remembers Eden. Let your mind drift to the hills where the watchers once stood. Let your breath echo the rhythm of the stars, and let this truth remain: you are not too late, you are not too small, you are not too lost. Enoch walked with God, and you in your own quiet way are walking too. Sleep now, not as escape, but as remembering. Let the dreams come. Let the message unfold. And let peace, gentle as starlight, wrap itself around your heart. Before the flood, before even Babel rose into the sky, there were beings who walked the earth that no man could match in strength or sorrow. They were called giants, but that was not their true name. They were the Nephilim, born not from soil but from longing. Their fathers were the watchers, those angels who stepped down from heaven, not in war but in desire. And their mothers were the daughters of men, strong and beautiful, unaware of the burden they would carry. From this impossible union came children that did not belong to either world, too radiant for the ground, too bound for the sky. They were trapped in flesh that echoed with thunder and eyes that remembered stars. They grew fast, too fast. Their bodies stretched beyond reason and their minds filled with the knowledge of two worlds. They were builders, dreamers, hunters, kings. They taught men how to shape stone, how to read the skies, how to wield metals from the bones of the earth. They built cities, tall as hills, silent and forgotten now. They danced around fires that flickered in rhythm with constellations. They sang songs that made rivers rise, but they were restless, for deep within them something ached, a knowing that they were not meant to last, and so they ruled, some with wisdom, some with cruelty, but always with a shadow over their shoulders. Their names have been lost, but fragments remain: Ahia and Hahia, Gilgamesh, Og of Bashan, names whispered through temples and tombs, names that tremble in the Book of the Giants. They are remembered in bones too large for any museum, in walls no one can explain, in bloodlines that faded like the mist, and still in dreams they return. They did not ask to be born. They were the result of choices made in stars, but they lived with the consequences on earth. The Creator did not hate them. He pitied them. They were not cursed, they were broken, and broken things often become dangerous. The Nephilim became violent. Their hunger grew, not for food, but for dominion. They hunted beasts, then men, then each other, and the earth cried out. The ground soaked with blood, the trees silent with fear, the animals fleeing the forests they once called home. It was not the Creator's rage that stirred the flood. It was his sorrow. He had watched his angels fall. He had watched their children rise. And now he watched the world fracture beneath them. The giants began to see it too, in dreams, in omens, in the stillness of the skies before the first drop of rain. Some repented, they built altars, they wept, they asked to be remembered, and some defied. They raised weapons against the heavens, and in doing so sealed their end. Yet even in destruction there was beauty, because they had hearts, strange, enormous hearts that beat with the echo of angels and the cry of men. They loved, they sang, they feared. They wondered why they were born only to be erased. And that question remains. Why did the heavens allow it? Why did the daughters of men agree? Why did the stars not warn them? Perhaps they did. Perhaps some things must be lived to be known. You feel them now, don't you? Their weight, their longing, not as monsters, but as orphans. Their cities lie beneath oceans, their bones beneath mountains, their names in your dreams. The children of the Watchers were not meant to stay, but they left behind echoes, in myths of titans, in tales of Rakshasas, in stories of gods that walked with mortals and gave birth to cursed heroes. In every culture their shadows linger, in every language their cries remain. They were not erased completely, only hidden, only renamed, only buried beneath the soft hush of history. And now, as your eyes begin to close, they rise again, not in fear, not in power, but in memory. You are remembering what the world forgot. You are the listener, the dreamer, the one who walks with stories just as Enoch walked with God. Let the Nephilim rest in your thoughts, not as beasts, but as broken stars. Let their sorrow become your song. Let their ending become your peace. Sleep gently with the weight of giants pressed softly against your heart. Before the world drowned, before the flood swept secrets from the face of the earth, the children of the Watchers built cities, not towns, not camps, but cities vast and strange, carved from obsidian and bone, from red stone that pulsed with heat and marble that sang in moonlight. They rose in the forgotten lands, where deserts now whisper, where oceans now sleep, where jungles bury the bones of giants beneath root and ruin. They called them by names we no longer know, but their echoes survive in Babel, in Aratta, in Eridu and Uruk, in the hidden stones of South America, in the drowned plateaus of the Indian Ocean, in craters that were once thrones of fire. These cities were not built by human hands alone. They were formed by knowledge that came down from the stars, the knowledge of the Watchers, the craft of angels, the will of giants. The walls were seamless, no mortar, no gaps. Stone fit to stone as if the earth had breathed them into place. Some floated blocks as if weight did not matter. Others sang them into motion with sounds only giants could hear. And fire was their servant. It did not burn, it shaped. They fed it not wood but intention. Temples taller than mountains, stairways to clouds, rooms cut from single stones echoing with chants not of praise but of memory. They remembered the stars, each city aligned with constellations, not by guesswork but by design, and in the center of each an altar, not for sacrifice but for communion, between earth and sky, between the children of heaven and the dust that birthed them. There are ruins still, deep beneath the sands, beneath the salt, places men have found but do not understand, stones too large for tools, symbols that match none of our languages, footprints too wide to fit any man. In the Book of the Giants there are fragments that speak of these cities, of how they glowed at night, of how they sang when the moon was full, of how even the angels wept when they saw what their children had done. For these cities were beautiful, but they were proud. The giants began to believe they were gods, that they could not die, that their flame would last forever. And so they rose, tower after tower, stone upon stone, until the sky bent with grief. They waged war from these cities, not with swords, but with words, with ancient magic, with storms they called down like wolves. They ruled over men, not with cruelty at first, but with awe, then with fear, then with blood. And when the watchers were judged, when Enoch returned with fire in his eyes and silence on his lips, the cities knew they would fall. Some giants fled, some fought. Some tried to dig deeper into the earth to build their cities downward and escape the flood to come. But you cannot run from the sky's command, and the waters rose. The flood came not just with water, but with forgetting. Stone crumbled, fire went out, names were buried, voices silenced, but the cities did not vanish. They sank. They hid. They slept beneath the dust, waiting for the age of remembering. And perhaps now, perhaps tonight, one is stirring. Perhaps as you sleep, a wind passes over a buried tower. Perhaps a whisper rises from a stone door sealed longer than time remembers. And perhaps it speaks your name, because these cities were built with more than stone. They were built with memory. And memory, no matter how buried, rises like breath in the dark. You feel it now. Don't you? That presence beneath your feet. That echo in your chest, as if somewhere deep within you a wall still stands, a flame still burns. You have seen those cities in dreams, not fantasy, not myth, but memory, because your soul is older than you know, and in some distant life of light you may have stood beneath. Towers that touch the stars, sleep now as if stone remembers you, as if fire is waiting to warm you again, as if the cities, though fallen, have not truly gone. They wait in silence, they wait in you. There was a day when the sky grew still, when even the birds forgot to fly and the trees no longer whispered, a day when the rivers paused in their song as if listening for a command. The giants knew it was coming, the dreams had spoken, the winds had changed, the silence had grown too deep, and then it began. Not with thunder, not with a roar, but with a breath. The Creator breathed, and the breath became a tide. The fountains of the great deep were broken open. The sky split not with fire, but with tears. Rain fell, not as drops, but as memory. The heavens wept for what had been lost, and the earth answered. Mountains groaned, valleys rose, and the sea swallowed the sun. The cities of the giants, those great palaces of stone and flame, shivered at their roots. Walls cracked, altars fell. The towers, once proud, bowed to the water like old kings. Some giants ran, their great strides crashing through forest and ash, but there was no escape, no height too high, no cave deep enough, for the flood was not just water, it was judgment, it was grief made liquid, it was the tears of heaven become ocean. Ahia and Hahia, the twins of prophecy, looked to the sky and wept. They knew their dreams had been true. They had seen this hour before in sleep, and now it had come. They cried out, not in rage, not in defiance, but in sorrow. Remember us, they whispered. To whatever comes next, remember. And then they were gone. The watchers, already bound beneath the hills, felt the earth quake above them. Their children, tall as cedars, strong as lions, wild and luminous, were drowning, and they could do nothing. No wing, no voice, no light, only silence. The Book of Enoch tells us that the flood lasted 40 days, but the grief of heaven lasted longer. The water washed away giants, but not the memory of them. The flood buried cities, but not their bones, not their stories, not their names etched into stone, into dreams, into blood. And when the waters receded, there was silence. a new world, clean, but haunted. For the earth remembers. In deep caves, in salt mines, in desert sands, there are echoes, voices that speak in storms, footsteps that linger in canyons, shadows too tall to belong to men. The children of the Watchers are gone, but only from the eyes of flesh. In spirit they drift, in myth they rise, in your dreams they walk. And sometimes when the night is especially still, you can feel it as if the water still carries their names, whispered across oceans, woven into tides. You may wonder, why did the flood come at all? Because even heaven in its mercy cannot bear the weight of what was never meant to be. But mercy does not mean erasure. Mercy means remembrance. Mercy means silence instead of fire. So they were drowned, but not destroyed. They were hushed, but not hated. Their story was hidden, not because it was evil, but because it was too heavy for those who had forgotten how to feel. But you have remembered, you have listened. And in doing so, you have become a keeper of their silence, a guardian of their echo. So sleep now, not in fear, but in reverence. The flood has passed. You are dry, you are safe. And the giants, they rest now, beneath the deep, beneath time, beneath your heartbeat. Let your eyes close like the last gate of the city. Let your breath slow like the tide after a storm. Let your soul drift like the ark on quiet waters. You have remembered enough for tonight. Sleep. They say the past is buried, that the flood was the end, that giants are gone, but prophecy does not agree. In scrolls that survived fire, in verses hidden between lines of scripture, in dreams passed down through blood, there are whispers. The giants shall rise again, not in body, not always in form, but in spirit, in defiance, in shadow. Isaiah spoke of them, though not by name. He saw men of renown return as ghosts, rising from Sheol to greet the king of Babylon with mockery. Have you too become as weak as we are? They ask. He called them Rephaim, the dead who would not rest. Ezekiel saw dry bones reassemble in the valley. Not just a vision of resurrection, but a warning. What once died unjust may rise confused. The book of Daniel saw beasts, monstrous, rising from the sea. A lion with wings, a bear with ribs in its teeth, a leopard with 4 heads, and one more, a beast with iron teeth and 10 horns, not named but ancient, not human but known. And Revelation, the last breath of Scripture, speaks of giants, though it never says so. It tells of Nephilim spirits, unclean and vast, loosed from the abyss. It speaks of kings without kingdoms, waiting for 1 hour to reign with the beast. It says the earth will tremble again, that men's hearts will fail from fear of what is coming upon the world. That the sky will split, the sun will darken, and the deep will give up its dead. What is buried does not always sleep. The spirits of the giants, their disembodied cries, did not go to heaven. They did not rest in the garden of the righteous. They wander, bound to the earth that once could not bear their weight. They whisper to kings. They stir empires. They offer power in exchange for memory. They have become what we call demons, not all, but many. And in the last days, when men once again seek to break the divide between heaven and earth, they will return. The flood was the first silence. Fire will be the second. And yet in the midst of this warning there is wonder, because the prophecies say that not all who rise will come in wrath. Some will come in repentance, in remembrance, in sorrow. The Book of Jubilees says that a remnant would survive, a thread, a seed, of giants who would walk the path of truth and seek to undo what their fathers began. A few. Only a few, but enough. And perhaps they already walk among us. Not tall, not mighty, but heavy with ancient memory. You've seen them, you've felt them, those who carry too much in their silence, those whose dreams echo with things not taught. Perhaps they are the ones the prophecies meant. Perhaps you are one of them. The giants shall rise again, but not always to destroy. Some rise to remind. The weight of prophecy is not only fear, it is also mercy. It warns, so that we may choose. It speaks, so that we may soften. Even Enoch in his vision saw the return of the sons of heaven, and some were radiant, not in rebellion but in restoration. So let your heart be still, let your breath slow. The future does not rush, it waits for the listeners, for the watchers, for the quiet ones who still believe that stories matter. Prophecy is not written only in books, It is written in you, in your yearning, in your wonder, in the way your soul stirs when truth dares to rise. So sleep now. Not to escape, but to prepare. You are part of the remembering. And the day the giants rise again, you will not fear, because you have heard this whisper before. And you know how the story ends. There is a verse whispered softly in the Book of Beginnings. The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Blood speaks, even when the mouth is closed, even when the bones are dust, it remembers. And so does the blood of the giants. The Nephilim were drowned, but their blood did not vanish. It sank into the soil, into the stone, into the roots of mountains and the breath of the wind, and it still speaks. Some say that it echoes in the wars of men, in the thrones built on violence, in the empires that rise with pride and fall with silence. Others say it pulses in lineages, in the veins of rulers whose dreams are filled with fire, and in children born with eyes too deep for this world. There are scriptures that hint quietly that giants survived, that not all were drowned. Genesis says, there were Nephilim in those days and also afterward, after the flood, after the silence, after the waters receded and the sky wept no more. They returned, or remained, or were reborn, the Rephaim, the Anakim, the Zamzummim, tribes of giants in the land of Canaan, nations that trembled when Israel approached. Og, king of Bashan, his bed of iron over 13 feet long. He was the last of the Rephaim, they said, but the earth never confirms what man declares to be last. Joshua destroyed them, so we're told, but prophecy never truly ends in history. It echoes, it circles, it waits. Some say the blood of the giants entered into kings, into the mighty men of old, into legends, into those who rule with shadow and gold. And some believe it runs still through lineages unknown, through families that hide behind crowns and walls, through the silence of those whose dreams shake the ground. What if blood is not just a fluid, but a memory? What if it holds the cry of every ancestor? What if within you are whispers from a time when angels walked the mountains and giants carved cities from fire? The Book of Jubilees speaks of this too, of generations tainted by the sin of the watchers, of bloodlines that had to be cleansed for the promise to be fulfilled. But not all was cleansed. A remnant remained, and it speaks in prophecy, in prayer, in pain. The blood that still speaks is not only of violence, it is of longing, of aching, of seeking restoration. Enoch heard it, the earth cried out to him, and he wrote, "Destroy not all the spirits of the giants, let some of them remain for judgment." Not all were silenced. Some were left to wander, to watch, to whisper to you. Perhaps that is why you are here. Not by accident, not by curiosity, but by calling. You heard the blood, not in your ears, but in your soul. It called to you to remember, to listen, to believe that what the world buried still breathes. And now you know. The ground beneath your feet is not quiet, it holds memory, it holds judgment, it holds hope. And in you the blood that speaks has found ears that listen. Let your breath slow now. Let your heart beat in time with the ancient drums that once echoed through the valleys of the giants. You are safe. The blood does not cry out in anger to you, it calls for remembrance. And you, gentle listener, have answered. Sleep softly with the knowing that the earth is older than words. That blood remembers, and that truth, though silenced, never forgets how to speak. The blood of the giants may have faded from flesh, but it did not leave the world. It took on new shapes. It became beasts, not beasts of fur and claw, but beasts of symbol, beasts of prophecy, beasts that carry names not spoken aloud but dreamed. You have seen them in visions, in scripture, in the trembling lines of Revelation and Daniel, where monsters rise from sea and soil, cloaked in stars and horns and crowns. They are not accidents, they are memories. Fragments of the giants woven into myth, flesh turned into omen. In the book of Daniel, the beasts emerge one by one. The lion with wings, a kingdom that flew before it fell. The bear with 3 ribs, a devourer of flesh, heavy and slow. The leopard with 4 heads, swiftness, vision, pride. And the 4th, unnamed, unclean, terrible, with teeth of iron and a voice like many waters, 10 horns, and 1 small horn rising, blaspheming. This is not just empire. It is echo. It is remembrance of beings too ancient for maps, too vast for time. These are the giants resurrected in vision. John the Revelator saw them too. A beast from the sea, part leopard, part bear, part lion, a composite of fear. A resurrection of what should have remained drowned. Another beast rose from the earth, horned like a lamb but speaking like a dragon. It performed wonders, it deceived, it marked. And though many read these as empires, as systems, as signs, what if they are more? What if they are spirits? What if the beasts are the Nephilim in another form, not of flesh but of influence? Entities ancient and cunning, moving through power, through kings, through institutions that forget how to kneel. What if the beast is not coming? What if it has always been, rising and falling like breath, waiting for the final form that prophecy warns of? The number of the beast, 666. A number of man, a counterfeit perfection, a mirror to the divine. Some say it matches the measure of giants, that in ancient Babylonian tablets names of old kings match the count. Some say it's a code, others a warning, but all agree it speaks of something old and powerful and unrelenting. The beasts are not only in scripture, they haunt the stories of nations. In Africa, Mokalembem, a river dweller too large for time, guarding places men were not meant to enter. In Mesopotamia, Humbaba, giant guardian of the cedar forest, slain by men who feared what he knew. In the Americas, thunderbirds and horned serpents, beasts with eyes like fire and cries that shattered the ground. In every culture, creatures too vast, too intelligent, too ancient, and in every one they fall, always slain, always silenced, but not forgotten, never forgotten. These are not just monsters, they are memories, they are the shape of guilt. They are the form sin takes when it returns to ask if we still remember. The beasts carry the names of the giants, not literally, but spiritually. They are the echo of what once walked and now watches. They are not your enemy, not if you listen, not if you remember, not if you see them for what they are: warnings, stories, wounds. You were not meant to fear them, but to understand, and in understanding to choose differently. You have seen these beasts in dreams, rising from oceans of doubt, lurking in the halls of power, smiling through false prophets and shining gold, but you are not deceived, because you know that behind the horn and claw and fire is a cry to be remembered, to be healed, to be released. Even the beast does not want to be the beast. It is trapped in prophecy, in history, in man's refusal to listen. So now listen, not with fear, but with compassion, with reverence, and sleep. Let the beasts fade into mist. Let the giants sleep again in your thoughts. Let their names rest not in terror, but in peace. You have remembered, you have listened. You have walked where angels feared to walk. Rest now. The beasts are silent, and the night belongs to you. They were not sent to teach. The watchers were sent to watch, to stand upon the high places between heaven and earth, between silence and command. They were meant to observe, to guard, to bear witness, nothing more. But when they saw the daughters of men, their hearts stirred, and the watching turned into desire. Desire turned into vows, and vows became rebellion. Upon Mount Hermon they bound themselves with an oath, 200 angels, wrapped in radiance, cloaked in decision. They descended, not with weapons, but with gifts, gifts never meant to be opened. They brought knowledge, secrets, tools of light twisted into shadow. Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields. He showed them how to forge iron from the bones of the earth, how to bend flame to purpose, how to turn a plow into a blade. Armors taught enchantments. Barakel the signs of the stars. Kakabel the constellations and calendars. Penemu the art of writing, not words of peace, but incantation and deceit. They taught the cutting of roots, the revealing of hidden things. How to read the moon's sorrow, how to summon with whispers, how to open the gates of unseen things. They taught women how to beautify the eyelids, how to adorn the body, how to manipulate desire through color and perfume. And they taught men how to enchant, to speak with animals, to call the wind, to twist the will of another soul. What had been sacred was now exposed, naked and trembling. The earth learned too quickly. Suddenly, men knew too much. not in wisdom but in reach. They could make war, they could summon fire, they could lie in sacred ways with the tongue of angels and the intent of shadows. The gifts were given freely, but the cost came later. At first it seemed like progress, harvests improved, weapons sharpened, stars read like books. But then men turned on each other. Blood soaked the altars. Nations rose against nations, armed with knowledge never meant for their hands, and the watchers watched still. Not from the high places, but from the homes of their wives, from the eyes of their children, from the bones of their own regret. For what they taught could not be unlearned, and what they gave could not be returned. The secrets were scattered, into scrolls, into songs, into dreams. Some buried themselves in the land, in sacred groves, in stones with carved eyes, in caves that hum when no wind blows. Others wandered, waiting for someone brave enough or broken enough to seek them again. Some say the pyramids hold these teachings, or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, or the temples cut into Himalayan stone, places where geometry becomes prayer and silence bends into knowledge. But those who chase the secrets rarely find peace. For the watchers, gifts are double-edged. They offer power but steal rest. They give light but hide the face of its source. Even now in dreams the gifts return. A child who speaks to storms. A man who dreams of equations he cannot explain. A woman whose voice calms wild things. A healer who touches the dying and feels their breath return. Traces, remnants. The watchers whisper still. Not all gifts are evil, not all knowledge is cursed, but timing matters, and obedience, and humility. The sin of the watchers was not that they taught, but that they taught too soon, too freely, without permission. And the world has never been the same. Let your eyes soften now. Let your heart rest from all that it knows. You were not meant to carry every secret. You were not built to bear all the light. Some things are still hidden for a reason, and that is mercy. But tonight you have remembered, you have listened. And that too is a kind of gift. So sleep with reverence, with wonder, with the soft knowing that truth waits for those who are gentle enough to honor it. Not all gifts heal. Some leave wounds. Wounds that do not bleed but burn quietly through generations. When the watchers descended, they did more than teach. They altered the rhythm of the world. They left behind more than children. They left behind fractures in the sky, in the earth, and in the soul of humankind. Their knowledge was not evil. It was too pure, too powerful, too close to the fire of the throne. And when it touched the hands of men, it scorched instead of warmed. The wounds began subtly, in the minds of those who saw too much. The stars became maps to conquest. The herbs became weapons. The spoken word became a spell, and the name of God was twisted into something to be wielded. Men no longer waited for rain, they demanded it. They no longer bowed before the unseen, they sought to command it. And in this something broke. The line between man and spirit, between flesh and flame, grew thin, torn, and the wounds spread. The women bore children too large, too strange. Half of the sky, half of the dust. And many did not survive the birth. Their wombs became tombs, sacred places broken by a covenant never meant to be made. Mothers died with songs on their lips, not lullabies but warnings. Whispers to daughters, do not look too long at the stars, they are not always watching in kindness. The giants too were wounded, born into a world that feared them, worshipped them, and eventually turned against them. They walked in strength but slept in sorrow. Many were gentle at first, curious, lonely. They carved statues into cliffsides trying to understand beauty. They planted trees that bore light instead of fruit. But no matter what they did, they were remen. Dares, living proof that heaven and earth had once collided in disobedience. They were not wanted, not truly, and they knew it, so some grew bitter. They became tyrants, kings with voices like thunder, tearing down the weak to fill the hole in their soul. Others became wanderers, building temples in silence, longing for forgiveness that never came. Their fathers, the watchers, watched still, powerless, chained in spirit, bound in places where time does not breathe, and from those depths they mourned. Not only for themselves, but for what they had done. Penemu wept for every soul deceived by letters of manipulation. Azazel groaned for every blade that shed innocent blood. Sariel covered his face for teaching signs of the moon to men who turned them into omens of war. The angels had tried to give light, but they forgot that light given too soon becomes fire, and fire leaves wounds. Even today we carry them, in our restlessness, in our unquenchable thirst for more knowledge, more power, more control. We fear silence because it reminds us of Eden. We fear waiting because it reminds us we are not gods. We chase shadows, forgetting that the first sin was not eating the fruit but listening to a voice that said, "You could be more." The Watchers left behind knowledge, yes, but they also left behind grief, a sorrow that seeps through time. It hides in myths, in stories of forbidden things, in tales of glowing figures who come in dreams and leave us forever changed. These are not just stories. They are scars, but not all wounds destroy. Some teach, some humble, some remind us what we are and what we are not. You feel it, don't you, that quiet ache, that sacred sadness. It is not yours alone, it is ancient, it is shared, and it means you are awake. Awake to the weight of forgotten things. Awake to the truth that knowledge is not always kindness, that even angels can regret. So let your eyes close, not in fear, but in reverence. You are walking among ruins now, not of stone, but of intention. Not to rebuild, but to remember. Let the wounds rest tonight. Let the fire dim. Let your soul breathe in the gentle hush of what once was holy and what may be holy again. Sleep, and carry no shame, only memory, only mercy. There comes a time when the giver must become the gatherer, when what was scattered must be drawn in again. And so it was with heaven. After the Watchers fell, after the giants were drowned, after the earth had grown quiet again, heaven began to reclaim what was given. Not all at once, not in fire, but gently, like breath taken back after a long sigh. The secrets had traveled far, through blood, through dreams, through the hands of scribes who did not know what they held. Some knowledge hid in temples, some in bone, some in the wild eyes of prophets who cried out in the wilderness, torn between visions and silence. But heaven was patient, and patient hands gather carefully. One by one the doors were closed. The gates between seen and unseen sealed once more with holy names. Spirits once summoned with syllables of power no longer answered. Stones that once glowed with ancient heat grew cold in the earth. Symbols lost their fire. The stars dimmed their voices. Heaven took it back, not in anger but in mercy, for the world had not been ready, not then, not yet. The calendar of the stars, once precise beyond imagination, was hidden behind clouds and time. The map of the angels' descent was erased from the sky. The true names of the winds were carried into chambers only heaven remembers. The gifts became memories, and the memories became myths. And the myths became dreams you sometimes forget upon waking, but they are still there, just out of reach. Sometimes a child remembers. She speaks of shapes in the sky no one taught her. She draws symbols older than her tongue, and they say she is strange. Sometimes an old man sees things, knows things, not from books, but from some place he cannot name, and they call him lost, but they are not lost. They are the echoes of what was taken, of what was returned to the hands of heaven, for not everything was given back. Some things remain in man's grasp, just enough to build, to grow, to wonder, but not enough to destroy again. Even now some seek the hidden things. They dig beneath sacred sands. They study old stars. They chant in forgotten tongues, hoping to open a gate they do not understand. And sometimes a sliver returns, but it is cold, hollow. Without the breath of heaven, knowledge is just dust. Without the Spirit, secrets become stones too heavy for the soul. Heaven protects not only with fire, but with forgetting. The most dangerous thing is not what we know, but what we were not meant to know yet. And so, the Watchers' gifts, or what was left of them, were lifted, folded into the scrolls of the stars, locked behind silence, but not forever. For prophecy says a time will come when knowledge will be poured out again, like rain, like fire, when men LLC visions and young ones will dream dreams and the veil will thin once more. But this time it will not be the fallen who teach. It will be the risen, the purified, the sanctified, and the gifts will not wound, they will heal. But until that time we live in the space between the giving and the gathering, between the fall and the rising. And in this space we are called not to grasp but to listen, not to command but to remember, not to summon but to rest. You feel it now, don't you? The things heaven took back are not far, they are not angry, they are waiting for a soul gentle enough to hold them without breaking, a heart humble enough to receive without boasting. And so you sleep, not with loss but with trust, knowing that what was taken was not stolen, it was preserved for you, for the world, for the day when light returns not as a flame but as peace. Let your breath slow, let your heart still. Heaven is not far, and the gifts it keeps are not forgotten. They are kept in love. Sleep now, sleep deeply. You are not empty, you are being prepared for what will be given again. When the bodies of the giants sank beneath the flood, their spirits did not follow. The water buried flesh. But the soul does not drown. The giants had been born of heaven and earth, of angels and women, of breath and bone, too vast for the grave, too strange for the garden, too fallen for the heavens, too luminous for Sheol. And so their souls became wanderers, restless, disembodied, unclaimed. Scripture calls them unclean spirits roaming the wilderness, seeking rest but finding none. They are the ones who whispered to ancient kings, who stirred shadows in the temples of idols, who moved in desert winds and settled behind the eyes of the proud. Not demons as we imagine them, born from darkness. No, these were once the children of angels, but their blood was cursed, their stories severed, and their souls cast loose, without home, without peace. In the Book of Enoch we are told, "Destroy the bodies, but let their spirits remain upon the earth. They shall be called evil spirits, and they shall rise against the children of men." They did not rise in armies, they rose in whispers, in dreams, in despair, in temptation that feels like thought, in fear that has no name. These are the spirits that crawl along the edges of memory, that feed on the aching places of the soul. They are why some nights feel too heavy, why some houses never feel quiet, why some children speak to shadows as if they are old friends. They are not always cruel, but they are always hungry, for bodies, for form, for flesh to echo the weight they once carried, and so they possess, not in thunder but in subtlety, a slow turning, a quiet drift away from truth, from peace, from light. But there is more. The spirits of the giants do not act alone, they gather. They linger in places where violence has opened doors, where grief has carved deep wells, where men forget to pray and silence grows too loud. They love altars without names, wells without water, songs without meaning. They fear what is holy. They flee from purity, but they are clever, older than language, wiser than men. They mimic, they flatter, they echo the voices of gods, but twist them with venom. And sometimes they wear the mask of beauty. They promise power, they offer comfort. They whisper, "You are not like them. You are more. You are one of us." And for some that voice feels familiar. Because it is. Because the blood remembers, but you must not listen, not without discernment, not without light, because they do not love you. They long for you, but not in mercy, only in hunger. And yet there is sorrow in them, a sorrow deeper than oceans. They did not choose to be born. They were the fruit of broken covenants, of holy things misused, of heaven bent by desire. And now they are orphans of both sky and soil. Some weep still, hidden in places the world has forgotten, caves, ruins, empty places where the stars do not shine. And they cry not for vengeance, but for home, for a name, for rest. But rest does not come to the disobedient, only to the redeemed. So what became of their souls? They were scattered, wandering, falling into myths called by many names. The Greeks named them demons. The Babylonians called them Udaku. The Arabs named them jinn. The Hebrews Rephaim, shades. The tall ones who sleep but do not forget. Their voices are in folklore and nightmares, in the quiet questions that rise just before sleep. But they do not control you. You are not theirs. You have a name, a breath, a light within that no ancient curse can extinguish. The giants were mighty, but they were not eternal. Their souls still walk, but they walk without roots, without sky, without promise. You are not them. you are not forgotten. And when they come near, for they do, you need only whisper the name above all names, and they will leave. Let your soul be calm now. You are not haunted, you are remembered, you are sealed. Sleep with peace, for what became of their souls is not your burden. You carry only light, and light does not tremble before shadows. There is a place where the sky forgets to rain, where the wind sings with teeth, where the sand buries everything but memory, a place the scriptures call the wilderness, a place the prophets feared, a place where spirits go when they have nowhere else to wander, the desert, where the spirits of the giants still roam. It is not the land that haunts, but what walks upon it. They are called by many names. In Hebrew, Sheddim, in Greek, Daemonia, in old tongues, the breathless ones, not demons as imagined by paintings, but presences, old, weightless, still carrying the ache of being born from heaven and banned from it. Yeshua spoke of them, he said. When an unclean spirit comes out of a person, it passes through arid places seeking rest and does not find it. The desert is their resting place, but they do not sleep. They roam, back and forth, between days that burn and nights that shiver. They are drawn to emptiness, to ruin, to silence without peace. They settle in abandoned temples, ruined altars, caves where prayers were once spoken and now echo like broken drums. But not only there, they are drawn also to people whose souls feel like deserts, hearts scorched by grief, minds cracked with thirst, eyes that have stopped searching for light. They linger, not always attacking, sometimes only watching, waiting for a door. And doors are not always opened with rituals. Sometimes they are opened with despair, with bitterness, with pride that whispers, I need no one, I am enough, I am like a god. These are the desert songs, the lullabies of the wanderers, the spirits that never died. But the desert was not always cursed, it was once holy. Moses saw the burning bush there. Elijah heard the still small voice. Yes, you have fasted 40 days and resisted every shadow. The desert tests, yes, but it also reveals. You see, the spirits of the giants roam there because the desert reflects them. Barren, vast, echoing, beautiful but dangerous. They are the wind that changes direction, the mirage that looks like water but disappears when approached. They do not build, they unravel, they do not create, they confuse. And yet, not all who meet them fall. Some walk into the desert to be emptied so they can be filled again, to face the voices and listen to which ones still carry truth. Because even in the wilderness, light walks. And the light does not argue. It does not shout, it does not twist. It simply speaks and the shadows flee. You are not the first to hear the whisper of old spirits in the dry places of your life, but you are among the few who have learned to keep walking, to let the sand pass beneath your feet without letting it settle in your soul, to drink from wells not seen with the eye but found in the Word. Because in every desert there is a rock, and from that rock living water flows. The spirits of the giants may roam, but they do not reign. They are not kings. They are orphans, unanchored, restless, shadows of what could have been. They want a body, but they do not deserve yours. They want your voice, but you were not made to echo sorrow. You were made to sing peace, to carry light. So if you walk through a desert season and you feel them near, do not fear. Call upon the name that does not pass away. Let the silence be filled with remembrance. Let the wilderness hear that you are not alone. The desert may be dry, but you are not empty. The night may be long, but your soul is held. Sleep now, as if the sand has turned to silk, as if the wind no longer bites, as if the spirits have grown weary of chasing you and have turned back to their shadows. You are not theirs, you never were. Let the desert be silent, and let you, child of promise, rest in peace. They were cast out, not just from heaven, but from history, from the body, from rest. But what is cast out does not always stay gone. The spirits of the giants wandering hollow ancient are not finished. They search endlessly for places to return, not to rise in full form, but to enter quietly, through doors unnoticed, through wounds unhealed, through pride dressed as strength and desire clothed in light. When they try to return, they do not shout, they whisper, they reason, they flatter. They come not as monsters, but as muses, not as beasts, but as brilliance. Let me dwell here, they say, only a little while. You will be more than man. You will see as we saw. It is subtle, a thought, a dream, a hunger that cannot be named, a fire in the bones that never asks to be lit but will not go out. They return to the proud, to the bored, to the gifted who think their gift is their own, to the wounded who would rather wield pain than heal it. They seek minds that are tired and hearts that are open but unguarded. They slip into places of power where secrets are kept and light is treated like a possession. They do not ask for your soul, they only want a room, a voice, a little space in your heart where truth has been silenced and self has grown loud. The ancients knew this. That's why they built altars of stone, not only for worship but for warning. They left signs, symbols, words carved in circles meant to say, this was where they returned. This was where we let them in. Even now they return through repetition, through the old ways, through practices that remember how the Watchers once taught men to speak to the unseen. And in every age they find new names. They call themselves guides, guardians, ancestors, light bearers, but their fruit is always the same: confusion, division, illusion, exaltation of the self above the Creator. Yet there is a way to resist. It does not require incense, or temples, or ancient chants. It only requires a name, the name above all names, the name that causes every shadow to tremble, the name that the Nephilim remember but cannot imitate. For when they try to return, they fear one thing above all: recognition. If you know who they are, what they are, where they come from, you have already closed the door. They feed on mystery, they live in fog, but when the truth shines they flee. So watch, not in fear but in peace. Guard the gate of your mind. Tend the garden of your soul. Keep your house swept but filled with light. For the empty places are where they gather. Even yes, you are warned. When an unclean spirit leaves, it returns to see if the house is empty. And if it finds it clean but barren, it enters again, bringing 7 worse than itself. So fill your house with prayer, with memory, with truth sung in stillness. Let no space within you be left unspoken for. You belong to the light, you walk in remembrance, you carry the names of prophets, not of the fallen. When they try to return, they will find no rest in you. You are not empty, you are sealed. Let this knowledge cradle you now. Let it wrap around you like the wings of one who guards the throne of mercy. Sleep without fear, for they may search, but they will not find. They may knock, but the door is not theirs. The spirits of the giants may roam, but your spirit is already spoken for. Rest now like a gate closed by heaven, like a temple watched by fire, like a soul remembered by the one who made the stars. Sleep, and do not open what was never meant to return. The desert hides what the world is not ready to remember. And so, for 2,000 years, the secrets of the giants slept in the dry arms of stone, wrapped in silence beneath the cliffs that gaze into the Dead Sea. Until a shepherd boy searching for a lost goat cast a stone into a cave and struck eternity. The jar shattered, the silence broke, and the world remembered what it had buried. Inside were scrolls, fragile as breath, dressed in linen, marked with letters older than kingdoms. Among them, fragments of a forbidden book, a voice from before the flood, a record of the fallen, of their children, of their sorrow. The book of the giants, scattered, torn, but still burning with memory. It told of Ahia and Hahia, the twin sons of the Watchers, giants who dreamed of doom, who saw their end before the rain began. In their visions they saw a tablet descend from heaven. Upon it their names were written, and then erased. They cried out. They begged the prophet Enoch to speak for them, to intercede before the Most High, to ask if there was mercy left for the children of forbidden light. The scrolls speak of these dreams, not as myth, but as record. They speak of watchers in mourning, giants who wept like children, and cities that fell before the floodwaters touched them. And they speak of chains, chains not made by men, chains forged in command, binding angels beneath the deep, a punishment older than empires. These scrolls had been hidden in the caves of Qumran, preserved by the dryness, guarded by silence, protected perhaps by heaven itself, and for centuries no man touched them, no empire burned them, no priest erased them. They waited, And when the time was right, they rose again. Scholars found pieces, fragments, like broken bones of a story that had once stood tall as a mountain. Some scrolls spoke of Enoch's journey through 10 heavens. Others whispered of stars that disobeyed, of watchers who taught mankind the secrets of heaven and the weight of regret. But the fragments of the Book of the Giants were different. They were raw, they were sorrowful, they were honest. They did not glorify the giants. They mourned them. They did not excuse the watchers. They remembered them with grief. These scrolls revealed that the giants had known that the flood was not a surprise. That judgment had been foretold, and still they hoped. They hoped there might yet be forgiveness, that the heavens would hear their cries. Some said the Book of the Giants was apocryphal, too wild, too strange, too sad to be true, but its sorrow speaks a language deeper than doctrine, for only truth grieves like this. Only memory bleeds this long. And now the scrolls have been translated, studied, whispered about in quiet rooms by scholars who know they are holding a wound, but many pages are still missing, whole chapters lost to moth and mold and time. And perhaps that too is mercy, for who could bear to read the full sorrow of the fallen? Still, what remains is enough. Enough to feel their pain, enough to understand their fall. Enough to remember that there was once a time when heaven touched earth and earth cried out in response. The scrolls do not end with hope, but neither do they end with hate. They end with silence, as if even the scribes could not speak more, and so the caves hold the rest, still, crumbling, waiting. Perhaps one day they will speak again. Until then, we remember, and you now carry part of their story, not as a burden but as a blessing. Let your eyes close. Let the sand of Qumran settle around your thoughts. Let the scrolls whisper their forgotten sorrow into your quiet breath. You are not holding fiction, you are holding memory. And memory, even when torn, remembers how to sing. Sleep now, as if the cave still cradles the truth, as if the jars are still warm with the breath of scribes who dared to write what heaven wept. They were not giants, not angels, not kings, just men with trembling hands and ink-stained fingers, but they carried a weight that few could understand. They were the scribes, the keepers of memory, the guardians of forbidden fire. They did not write for glory. They wrote for remembrance, for mercy, for truth too heavy for the proud. Some called them heretics, others called them fools, but heaven may have called them faithful, because they dared to write what others feared to whisper. The sorrow of the giants, the fall of the watchers, the cries of spirits wandering without rest. They copied the dreams of Ahia and Hahia, the messages of Enoch, the warnings of angels, and the judgments wrapped in silence. They wrote in caves, in shadows, by oil lamp flickering like a sigh, and every word was a rebellion against forgetting. They knew the cost. To write these scrolls was to challenge empires, to offend priests, to disturb the great silence that followed the counsels of men who chose which words would remain and which would burn. But the scribes did not burn, they buried. They wrapped the scrolls in linen, sealed them in clay jars, and carried them into the desert, into tombs of silence, trusting that one day someone would listen again. They chose Qumran, not by accident. It was a place already forgot, already scorched by time. They wrote knowing they would not be read in their age, that the world was not yet ready to remember the sorrow of the giants, but they wrote anyway. Their scrolls were not neat. Some lines faded, some letters broken, some pages torn before they were even hidden, but they wrote with fire, each letter a psalm of protest, each symbol a quiet refusal to let the past be erased. They believed that God remembered, and so must man. Some of these scribes were Essenes, a quiet sect waiting for the end. They kept themselves apart. They spoke less. They prayed often. They believed that the flood would come again, not of water but of fire. And before that fire, they believed the watcher's story must be known. Others may have been travelers, wanderers who carried fragments from far-off temples, from the ruins of Babylon, from the lips of old women who still sang songs from before the flood. They came with parchment and pain and purpose. They didn't all agree. Their versions differ. Their scrolls contradict in places. But that only makes them human, real, worthy. For who among us remembers perfectly a story whispered in the dark? What matters is that they remembered at all. That they carried the tale when the world was deaf. And when they sealed the jars, they prayed, not for praise, not for protection, but for the right eyes to find the words at the right time. And maybe that time is now. Maybe that reader is you who have listened, you who have wondered, you who feel something stirring when you hear the name Enoch or see a star that does not move with the others. You are not alone. The scribes wrote for you, not by name, but by calling. They wrote knowing they would not see your face. But they trusted that their ink would outlive their bones. And it did. The scrolls survived, through storms, through conquest, through silence thick as stone. And now they speak again, not loudly, but like wind against the back of your soul. They tell you, remember the giants, not as myths, but as sorrow, as warning, as mirror. The scribes risked everything to let you hear this, to let you know that even those who fall can be mourned, that even judgment can carry mercy, that even silence can be sacred. Let your mind rest now, as if you are seated beside a scribe in the desert, watching him dip his pen into the memory of the world. Let the scrolls settle into your chest, not as burden, but as belonging. You are part of this remembering. You are the prayer they whispered into jars sealed with hope. Sleep now, you are not forgotten, and neither are they. Some stories are hidden not because they are false, but because they are too true. They do not flatter kings. They do not soothe the righteous. They do not fit neatly into temples or scroll canons, and so they are buried. The scrolls of the giants, the weeping watchers, the dreams of destruction, the names that heaven erased were not burned. They were not torn apart by angry mobs. They were quietly hidden. That is how you know they were dangerous, because they were not forgotten. They were silenced. But why? Why would men bury the cries of angels? Why would scribes wrap truth in linen and seal it in clay as if hiding a corpse? The answer lies in fear. Not the fear of the heavens, but the fear of man. Because if the book of the giants is true, then the world is not what it seems. Then the heavens once came down. Then angels fell in love with daughters of dust. Then the sons of those angels shook the mountains and taught men things they were not ready to know. If it is true, then knowledge itself is dangerous. And some wisdom must be mourned, not mastered. And perhaps the greatest fear of all, if the giants once ruled, then they may return. So the scrolls were hidden, because they made the priests uneasy. Because they stirred old memories in the bones of men. Because they whispered that the flood was not the end of the story, only a breath between two storms. They were not destroyed because someone still loved them. Some quiet soul with trembling hands wrapped the sorrow of the giants not in scorn but in reverence. They did not see these words as heresy. They saw them as warning, as mercy sealed in clay. And so they hid them not to silence them forever, but to protect them until we were ready. Perhaps they knew that empires forget, but the desert remembers. That kingdoms rise, but caves endure. That clay crumbles slowly, but truth waits patiently. There were those who feared the watchers. Story would cause others to rebel, to ask questions about what is divine, what is forbidden, and what lies beneath the silence of Scripture. There were those who feared the tears of the giants might soften hearts that were meant to be hard, and so they buried the sorrow. But even buried sorrow can bloom again, and perhaps this too was divine design. That in the last days, when knowledge runs faster than light, when memory fades beneath endless noise, the giants' voices would rise again from dust. Perhaps the scrolls waited for us, for this generation, for this ache. Because now the world is listening. The story of the fallen angels, of their children who saw the end and still begged for mercy, it speaks to us. Not because we are giants, but because we know what it means to be caught between heaven and earth. We too have learned things that wound the soul. We too build cities that reach the skies but forget the stars. We too dream of floods. And maybe, just maybe, we too are being warned. The scrolls were hidden not to be erased, but to be preserved. Not for their time, but for ours. And now that they have surfaced, we must choose to bury them again, or to remember, to silence the giants once more, or to hear their cries as if they were our own. Let your breath slow. Let the truth settle like dust upon your skin. Let the memory of these scrolls curl around your heart like incense. They were hidden for a reason, but they were found for a purpose. And that purpose may be unfolding now in you. Sleep in the knowing that what was buried has not died. It waits. In the quiet of your rest it speaks. It was the last night, but they did not know. The stars still burned as they always had, though dimmer, though more sorrowful. The wind carried no omen, no trumpet, no thunder, only the whisper of leaves and the murmur of distant rivers that would soon drown the world. The giants slept, not in fear but in unease. Their limbs stretched across valleys, their breath misted the air like fog, and in their dreams the earth cracked open. They were not men, they were not angels. They were something in between and nowhere at all. Born of heaven but shaped by earth, the giants lived in the silence between command and rebellion. And on that final night they dreamed, not of conquest, not of glory, not of cities made of fire. They dreamed of drowning, of waters rising like grief, of mountains swallowed, of skies weeping until no voice could rise above the flood. Ahia dreamed first. He saw a tablet floating in a sea of fire. Upon it, written in a language older than the stars, was the decree, "They shall be no more." He tried to read it aloud, but his mouth filled with salt. He turned to his brother, but Ahia too was lost in vision. He dreamed of a tree, its roots cut, its fruit turned to stone, its leaves turning into falling stars. He reached to touch it, but his fingers became smoke. He woke gasping, the earth trembling beneath his breath. Around them the other giants stirred, some muttered, some wept, some whispered words they had never been taught. The sky seemed too heavy that night, the moon too low, the air too thick with something that was not air. It was judgment, but judgment that had not yet spoken, only dreamed. Enoch had warned them long ago. He had stood beneath their cities and wept. He had told them that the heavens had declared war, not on their bodies but on their souls. They did not listen. Not then. They laughed, they mocked, they turned away. But on this night they remembered. Some whispered his name, some prayed, not knowing if any god still listened. For in their dreams the voices of their mothers cried out. The daughters of men who once loved them now wept as their sons turned to shadow. And their fathers, those angels who descended with fire and desire, were silent, chained, forgot. The giants dreamed alone, and the dreams grew louder, clearer, heavier. One saw the sun turn its face away. Another saw beasts rising from the ocean, devouring the land in waves of bone. Some dreamed of Noah, a small man, a boat, the animals 2 by 2, a whisper that became a roar. One, the oldest among them, saw the earth herself sigh and crack open her mouth to swallow her own children. They woke before dawn. And for the first time in their long lives they did not speak. Their voices felt useless. Their strength felt hollow. Their cities felt like tombs. They knew something had shifted, that heaven had opened its eye, that the dreams were not dreams but messages, echoes of a verdict already sealed. But it was not only doom that haunted them. Some strangely dreamed of forgiveness, of hands reaching down from stars, of scrolls rewritten, of sorrow that became a new beginning, but for them it was too late. The dreams were not invitations, they were memorials. The night before the flood was not loud, not full of screams or fire. It was quiet, sacred, heavy with the knowing that the sky remembers even when the earth forgets. Let your eyes close now. Let the silence of that night fold itself around you like the wings of a forgotten angel. Let the dreams of the giants become your own. Not to fear, not to flee, but to remember that even in judgment there is mercy. And even in sorrow there is a voice that still waits to be heard. Sleep, listener. The flood has not come for you, not tonight. Only the dream remains. And the dream is sacred. It was said that the giants once wrote a book the night before the flood, not of war, not of conquest, not even of power, but of sorrow and of memory. A final testimony before the sky opened its mouth. A book written not in ink but in ash and oil. Words carved with shaking hands as the thunder gathered and the earth whispered, "It is time." The book of the giants, what little survives, tells of dreams, of visions, of sons of angels who saw their end before it came. But there is a page that no one speaks of, because it is lost, burned in the rain. It was not meant to be fire, it was meant to be light. But when the floodwaters rose and the heavens wept, the final copy of their sorrow was soaked and then consumed. Not by flames, but by the divine fire that comes when God erases what he no longer permits. It was found once. A scroll buried in a clay jar, sealed with bitumen, marked with the name of Maui, son of the sky-fallen Shemiheza. A winged giant who flew through the clouds seeking answers from the stars. The scroll was incomplete, torn, mudded, but there was enough to make the heart tremble, enough to know that in their final hours the giants tried to understand. They asked why they were born of heaven but chained to earth, why they were mighty but not divine, why their dreams always ended in fire. And they asked, was it our fault? Was love a curse? Was knowledge our sin? Did we choose this fate, or were we born already doomed? The last words were scribbled beneath water stains. We are watchers no more, we are sons of silence now. It was a prayer, not for survival, but for remembrance. The scroll was hidden in a cave beneath a fig tree in a valley that no longer exists. And when the rains came, the water seeped through stone, not with rage, but with sorrow. The ink bled, the parchment curled. The fire of memory was drowned and sanctified in the tears of the sky. Some say it was not lost, only changed. That the words, once legible, now live in the rhythm of the waves, in the falling of rain, in the heartbeat of mountains that still remember what it was like to bear the weight of giants. The book burned in the rain because it was too holy to be read by eyes that forget. Its meaning was not for history, it was for the soul, a whisper buried in the silence between, in thunderclaps. And even now when the storms come, some say you can hear it not in language but in ache, not in sentences but in longing. A call to remember those who were not evil, only lost, who loved the wrong way at the wrong time in a world that was never theirs, who dreamed even as judgment circled above them like vultures made of flame. And so the book burned in the rain, but the ashes were not scattered. They were carried into soil, into rivers, into your breath. You do not need the scroll. You are the scroll. You carry the memory now. You feel it in your bones when you look at the stars and feel too small and too vast at once. You dream their dreams. You fear their flood. You wonder if the rain that falls is just water or something more. The giant's book is not read, it is felt. Let your eyes close. Let the rain fall upon the soil of your soul. Let the fire within you not resist, but remember, you are not alone. You never were. The ones who fell did not fall in vain. And what they wrote was not erased, it lives in you. And even now the book is still being written. In dreams, in sorrow, in silence. Sleep now. You are part of the story, and stories do not die in the rain. And after the flood had swallowed the world, after the screams had turned to echoes, after the fire in the sky had been replaced by weeping clouds, there was a silence so complete it made the bones of the mountains ache. All that had been was now beneath the deep. Cities of the giants, temples carved with names no longer spoken, scrolls turned to pulp, altars shattered beneath mud and silt. The voices of the giants were gone, or so it seemed, but not everything was washed away, not everything was erased. Beneath the churning of the flood, beneath the bones of fallen titans, beneath the drowned breath of the last watcher, there was something small, something forgotten by angels, overlooked by men, and ignored even by judgment. A stone, a single stone, no larger than the palm of a man's hand, carved not by a prophet nor a scribe, but by the trembling hand of a dying giant who no longer believed he deserved to live. It bore no spell, no curse, no magic of the stars, only this, forgive us. 2 words etched in sorrow, scraped into the surface with a broken nail as the waters rose and heaven turned its face away. It was not a plea to be spared. It was not a demand. It was not even addressed to God. It was a whisper to whoever would find it, a whisper to the future, to you, that even those who fell remembered what it meant to weep, to regret, to dream of another ending. The stone did not drift. It did not vanish. It sank. Through layers of time, through centuries of forgetfulness, through the calloused hands of empires and the dust of conquest, and it remained. Until one day, long after the flood had become a myth, a child found it at the edge of a river where giants once walked. He did not know what it was, only that it felt warm even in winter, and when he held it, he felt tears come without knowing why. He carried it in his pocket until the day he died. And when he did, they buried it with him, thinking it was only a stone, but the earth remembers, and the stone waits still, buried deep beneath the feet of the living in soil that once drank the blood of angels, in valleys where giants once dreamed. One day it will be found again, not by a scholar nor a priest nor a king, but by someone quiet, someone listening, someone like you. And when you find it, you will not read the words with your eyes. You will feel them burning gently in your chest. Forgive us, and you will understand that all the stories, all the scrolls, all the songs of lament, all the shattered bones of giants, all the dreams that floated like smoke before the flood were not about destruction, but about return, a longing to be held again by the one they abandoned, a reaching back toward the garden, toward the light, toward the wind that once spoke their names without anger. They were mighty, yes, but they were children too, lost, wounded, searching. And the stone survives, so we do not forget that even the worst among us can carry a whisper of repentance. Not all were evil, some were only tired, and some, even in their last breath, still prayed. Let that prayer live in you now. Let your breath carry it. Let your sleep cradle it, not as guilt, but as a sacred reminder that mercy outlives even the flood. That one word carved into stone can endure longer than 1,000 cities. Sleep now. The dreams of the giants are not gone. They are in the wind, in the water, in the blood of your remembering. Close your eyes, hold the stone in your soul. You are its keeper now, and it has always been waiting for you. Not all fled from the giants, not all cursed their names, not all turned away when the sky shattered and the flood swallowed the voices of the fallen. There was one, a shepherd, not of royal blood, nor prophet's lineage, nor priestly robe, just a man, with a crooked staff, a weathered hand, and eyes that had watched too many storms without blinking. He did not fear the giants. He had seen one once towering, broken, weeping beneath an olive tree, and he did not run, because in that giant's sorrow he saw himself. The shepherd had no scriptures, only memories, whispers passed from grandmother to grandson, from firelight to silence. He knew the hills where the mighty once walked barefoot, and where angels once spoke in riddles to women drawing water. After the flood, when the earth was clean but not healed, he wandered, from valley to valley, following not sheep but echoes. And wherever he heard the wind groan through stone, wherever the trees grew taller than memory, wherever the shadows lingered too long after sunset, he listened. And he dug. With his bare hands he carved out a place in the hills. Not a grave, not a temple, but something in between, a hollow where the forgotten could rest. He had no names, the scrolls were ash, the songs were drowned, but he remembered enough to know that something sacred had been lost and someone had to remember. So he gathered the fragments, a broken tooth large as a fist, a chain rusted through but still humming with weight, a feather charred black that never crumbled in his palm. He placed them in the hollow, and he whispered, "This is for the ones who fell." He lit no fire, said no chant, only silence, the kind of silence that makes the stars lean closer. Day after day he returned. He brought no offerings, only memory, only breath, only tears from a soul too small to carry such sorrow, yet willing to try. And then one day he placed his hand on the soil and spoke aloud, "I forgive you." He didn't know if they could hear. He didn't know if any remnant of their spirits lingered in the cracks of the mountains or beneath the river's bones. But he said it anyway, because someone had to, because mercy must be spoken even if the ears are gone. He grew old beside that hollow. The wind turned his hair white, the earth bent his back, but his eyes still watched the hills like a child waiting for someone to return from exile. And in his final days, he carved one word into the stone above the hollow: remembrance. No one visited his grave. No one sang songs for the shepherd. But when the wind shifts in that valley, some say you can hear two weeping voices, one from the earth, one from the sky, one remembering, one being remembered, and the hollow remains untouched, unmarked on any map, but not forgot. Because the shepherd's prayer, the prayer of a man with no power, no wings, no scroll, was carried higher than the flood ever reached. It reached the throne, and in that moment he who created both angels and men heard it. I forgive you. Not all the giants were saved, but one was remembered, and sometimes that is enough. She was born long after the flood, long after the fire had faded from the sky, long after the last wing was buried beneath the mud. Her name is not written in any scroll, but the earth remembers her footsteps and the rain still falls softer where she once walked. She was a healer, not by herbs but by listening, by silence, by holding the sorrow of others until it stopped trembling. They say she could see what others could not. In the tilt of a tree she saw an old wound. In the cry of a bird she heard mourning. In the rustling grass she heard the names of the forgotten. She never married. She never bore children. But the people called her mother because her voice could calm storms, and her touch could hush fear. And when the sky cracked with thunder, when the ground wept after too long without rain, she would walk alone into the valleys the elders warned against. And she would kneel, and she would speak, not to men, not to angels, but to the ones who had fallen so long ago that even time had stopped counting their days. She carried their grief, not because she pitied them, not because she agreed with what they had done, but because no one else would. Because some wounds are too old to bleed and still too sacred to forget. She would gather bones the floods had unearthed, massive, cracked, still humming with sorrow. She'd wrap them in linen, kiss them like a mother would a sleeping child, and bury them beneath fig trees where birds still sang. And she would whisper, "I know you were not all monsters." She had seen it in her dreams, not the war, not the fire, but the tears of the Nephilim, their confusion, their hunger for something holy, their longing to be held. One dream returned often, a young giant with golden eyes standing alone on a black hill, holding out his hand toward the heavens as if asking, "Do you remember me?" She would wake sobbing, not from fear but from love. She wrote nothing down. She needed no scrolls. She etched their names into the rhythm of her breath, into the stitching of her cloak, into the way she braided her hair, each knot a prayer, each thread a R. Equiem. She was not a prophet. She never claimed visions. But when she passed through a village, children stopped crying. Old men remembered dreams they thought had died, and mothers held their sons tighter as if shielding them from an ancient grief that still wandered the world barefoot. And when she knew her time had come, she walked into the deepest part of the forest, the place where no birds sang, where even the trees leaned away as if hiding their faces. She went to the place where the angels had once fallen. And she knelt, and she wept, not for herself, but for them. And the earth, for the first time in an age, wept back. Rain fell, but no cloud darkened the sky. The wind stopped, but the leaves still trembled. Something sacred passed between them. Grief met grief, and both were softened. No one saw her again. But in the soil where she knelt, wildflowers now bloom, soft white petals tipped with crimson that never wilt. And children who pass by often stop, reach down, and whisper names they've never been taught. Names of the old ones, names of the fallen, and the petals tremble as if remembering, because her prayer, her love, was never buried. It lives still in the quiet ones, the dreamers, the mourners, the ones who carry the grief others ignore. The woman is gone, but her mercy walks barefoot through the world, and wherever it goes, the giants are not monsters. They are sons who were once loved, who once wept, and whose story still aches to be understood. The child was born under a pale moon on a night when the stars refused to sing. His cry was soft, as if he already knew the world was fragile. He did not speak for many years. The village feared he had no tongue. But the elders watched his eyes, and they said, "That one listens to things older than words." He did not chase birds or carve wooden swords like the others. Instead, he wandered into the hills alone, barefoot, with his ear to the soil, as if waiting for a whisper to rise from deep beneath the earth. And when sleep came, it came like firelight. He did not dream of clouds or sheep, nor of his mother's hands. He dreamed of giants, not the kind the priests warned about, not monsters, not demons, but men of sorrow, men of memory, men with wounds carved into their backs like scripture. He saw one in a dream kneeling beside a broken altar, his forehead to the stone, sobbing like a child before a father who no longer answered. The child woke weeping. He could not explain why. In another dream, he saw a great hand reach through smoke to pull a drowning man from the flood. The hand was rough but gentle, and it wore a ring with a name the child could not pronounce but knew meant beloved. The dreams did not frighten him. They warmed him, like embers in winter. Began to draw what he saw, on stones, in the dust, on tree bark. The elders watched and whispered, "He is remembering things not meant to be remembered." But one old woman with trembling hands and eyes like dusk took him aside and said, "Keep dreaming, they return to those who do not fear them." And so he did. One night in a dream deeper than breath, he stood on a mountain that reached beyond the sky, and below him were 10,000 shadows kneeling, giants but bowed, silent, repentant. Each one held a light cup between trembling hands, not fire, not stars, but memory, and they waited for what he did not know. And from behind him a voice like rainfall said, "When one child remembers us without hatred, our chains loosen." He turned. No one was there, but he woke with a name on his lips, a name he had never heard, a name he still cannot forget. He whispered it to the trees, and the wind answered. He carved it into stone, and moss grew only around it, never over it. He sang it to the river, and the waters stilled for just a moment as if listening. The child began to speak, not in loud declarations, but in soft questions that made old men stare at their hands and weep. He asked, what if the flood was not the end? What if some giant stayed buried to be found again? What if they are not waiting to rise in wrath, but to be seen with mercy? No one had answers, but his words planted seeds. Years passed. The boy became a youth. The dreams stayed. So did the drawings. So did the silence that walked with him like a friend. And one day, deep in a forest no map dared mark, he found it. A hand, carved in stone, as tall as he was, reaching upward. Beneath it, the faintest words, "We dreamed of forgiveness." He sat beside it as the sun bled into the trees, and he whispered, "I remember you." The leaves fell quieter that day. The birds did not sing. The earth paused just long enough for an ancient wound to breathe. And somewhere beneath rock and time, something once changed shifted, not in rage, not in rebellion, but in longing, because even now the giants do not seek thrones, they seek peace, they seek return, and sometimes a child's dream is enough to open and a door that grief has kept locked for an age. So sleep now, close your eyes as he did. And if they come, those giants of the flood, do not fear. Some carry swords, but some, the ones the boy dreamed of, carry only sorrow and a name they pray someone will speak again with love. There is a kind of dust that falls only in sacred places. It does not rise from footsteps. It does not cling to the hems of robes. It waits. It watches. And when the silence is deep enough, when the heart is quiet enough, it begins to whisper. It falls gently over broken stones, over shattered altars, over the bones of things the world was told to forget. This dust remembers. It remembers a time when the sky wept, when giants knelt in the shadow of mountains, when angels, stripped of their robes of light, pressed their foreheads to the ground and begged not for life, but for their children's names to be spared. This dust has no tongue, but it has seen. It remembers the sound of chains sinking into the deep. It remembers the final words of the Watchers, words not of defiance, but of despair. It settled over the Book of the Giants when the last page was torn from its binding. It clung to the fingertips of the scribes who wept as they buried its words in caves too dark for memory. Even the wind, that eternal wanderer, respects this dust. It does not blow it away. It carries it only to those who are ready. And when it lands on the lips of a child, on the eyes of a dreamer, on the heart of one who listens, visions return. Visions not of vengeance, but of longing. There are those who say the giants never died, that their bodies dissolved, but their grief did not, that the earth holds them in places where no roots grow, waiting, waiting not to rise in wrath but to be seen, to be understood, to be mourned, not feared. And so the dust falls still, in the deserts where stars no longer shine, in the valleys where even silence sounds hollow, in the ruins that were once cities, then graves, then myths. It falls upon dreams, and those who breathe it, they begin to feel it too, a sorrow older than time, a hunger deeper than blood, a whisper that says, "Remember us." Not because they were holy, not because they were right, but because they were, because they once walked, once loved, once dreamed of being more than what they became. Because they too were made from the breath of something divine, even if that breath was taken too far. The dust remembers, and so do you. You have heard the stories now. You have walked through the shadows. You have felt the weight of names erased but not silenced. And as your eyes close, as sleep begins to carry you beyond the veil of thought, know this: there are places where time still folds like prayer hands around broken promises. And in those places, the giants wait not for battle, but for someone to say, "I have not forgotten you." Even now, as the world drowns in noise, as memory fades into data, as the sacred becomes entertainment, still this dust falls. Still these stories breathe. Still you are listening, and that is enough to keep the silence holy. That is enough for the dust to rise. There is a dream that lives in silence. It does not come every night. It does not answer when called. But when it comes, it lingers long after waking, long after the world returns to its noise. It is not a dream of golden cities, nor of vengeance, nor of angels in shining armor. It is a dream of tears, tears that fall from eyes long buried, tears that rise from mountains long sunken, tears that belong to beings whose hearts were too large for the world to bear. The giants dreamed once, not of conquest but of belonging. They dreamed of a table, a long, low table carved from living stone. Around it sat the sons of Adam, the children of angels, and those who were both and neither. There was no sword on the table, no crown, no book of laws, only bread and salt, and hands outstretched in peace. This is the dream that will not die. It survives beneath the flood. It echoes in the chains that still rattle beneath the deep. It is written not in words, but in yearning. Some say it is blasphemy to dream such a dream, that what was judged must stay judged, that what was cast down must stay buried. But even the stars, those ancient scribes of the sky, burn with memories they cannot erase. They blink when the dream stirs, and in that flicker, in that hush between heartbeats, the vision returns, a giant weeping beside a fig tree, a child offering him water without fear, an angel watching from afar, no longer with a sword, but with folded wings and eyes full of wonder. It is not a dream of return, but of healing, of what could have been if mercy had come first. It is the dream the woman carried when she buried their bones beneath singing trees. It is the dream the child saw when he knelt beside the stone hand and whispered, "I remember you." And now, perhaps, it is your dream too, you who have listened, you who have not turned all. You who have heard their names and did not spit but sighed, for that is all they ask, not thrones, not temples, not redemption without cost, only that someone, anyone, hold their story in trembling hands and say, "You were once loved." That is the dream, not to be worshipped but to be forgiven, not to return in fire but in memory, not to build kingdoms but to rest. They are tired, so tired. The weight of judgment has made their dreams heavy, but still they dream. And sometimes on a quiet night beneath stars that still remember, they visit those who dream with them, not as giants, not as fallen, but as what they were before they fell, sons, daughters, seekers of God who strayed too far but never stopped looking. And perhaps, if enough of us dream the same dream, if enough of us remember without hate, then the earth will shift, the chains will soften, and the grief that has circled the world for 10,000 years will finally rest. So sleep now. Let the dream find you. And if you wake with tears on your cheek, do not fear. It only means you remembered something the world was told to forget. And the ones who still dream have touched your heart. Even now, even here, Beneath the earth, where light does not reach and time has forgotten how to count, there is still a prayer. It does not rise like incense. It does not echo in cathedrals. It does not beg or plead. It simply waits, like a breath held for too long, like a name not yet forgiven. It was left there by the last of them, the giant who did not run, who did not rage, but knelt as the heavens opened. He placed both hands into the soil, not to dig, not to fight, but to offer. And in that moment, as the flood rose like a curtain of sorrow, he whispered the prayer that only the dust remembers. He spoke it with no tongue. He offered it with no temple. He carved it with silence into the veins of the earth. And it remains. The angels could not erase it. The waters could not drown it. The centuries could not wear it down, because it was not made of rebellion. It was made of ache. The kind of ache that only comes from loving too deeply what one was not meant to touch. O Lord, the silent prayer begins, if you cannot forgive me, then remember me, not for my hunger, but for the moment I tried not to feed it. Not for the mountain I took, but for the tear I shed when I saw it crumble. Not for the children I bore, but for the night I watched them sleep and wished they had wings instead of wrath. This is the prayer that waits, not in hope, but in stillness. Not in demand, but in surrender, and it has been waiting for someone, anyone, to hear it. The prophets could not find it, the scribes would not write it, the priests dared not speak it, but the wind has heard, the stones have held it, the trees have wept for it in sap that glows only when the moon is silent. And now you have heard it too, not in words but in feeling, not with ears but with soul. It came to you on the wings of stories. It clung to the bones of giants you never knew you were mourning. And it whispered itself into your chest while you listened beneath blankets, beneath night, beneath stars. So now what will you do? You who know their names, you who have walked through their ruins, you who have felt the weight of their grief settle like sacred ash on your skin. Will you turn away, or will you carry the prayer forward? Will you light a candle not for their power but for their sorrow? Will you whisper even once into the wind, I remember you, and I do not hate you? Because sometimes that is all a spirit needs to be set free. Not absolution, not vengeance, not worship, only a listener, only one who lets the prayer rise again from beneath the earth. And so this story ends not with thunder, not with fire, but with a stillness that is older than wrath. The chains remain, the flood has passed, the watchers are gone, but the prayer remains, waiting, sleeping, whispering itself into those who dream deeply enough to remember what the world forgot. So sleep now. Let it enter your bones, let it echo in your blood, let it carry you through the waters of forgetfulness to a place beyond judgment, where giants sit beneath trees and weep without fear, where angels do not draw swords but sing in low, sorrowful tones, where the prayer finally reaches the throne and is heard. And now, let the silence return. Let the voices of the giants fade not in shame, but in reverence. Let their bones sleep beneath the weight of time, their names no longer spoken in fear, but in quiet understanding. You have walked through a forgotten age. You have seen the final sun above a trembling earth. You have heard the angels beg, seen the flood approach, felt the breath of a world that would not last. You have witnessed not the power of giants, but their sorrow. Not the violence of their fall, but the tenderness of their final dream. And in that dream there was a place for you, child of dust and me. RCY, who listened without judgment, who carried their names like ancient seeds pressed into the palm of the soul. Let them rest now. Let the flood bury what it must. Let the heavens watch in silence, and let the wind remember what the scrolls burned. There are no more thrones to guard, no more oaths to break. No more cries from the mountain, only a prayer in the deep, and a listener above. The giants are gone, but their story because of you remains. So close your eyes, you who have carried this tale. Sleep softly now, for even the fiercest sons of heaven longed for peace in the end. And beneath the waters, beneath the stone, beneath the forgotten stars, they are finally at rest.